If somebody were to ask me the question whether there's life in the universe other than on the Earth, the answer is undoubtedly yes. But where?
These 9 planets circling our local star, the Sun, make up our solar system, our own corner of the universe. All through history our horizons have been limited, confined to just one planet, Earth. But now we can travel through space and at last meet our fellow planets as worlds in their own right.
And that would have been something which would have been beyond fantasy to those first people who looked at the stars so very, very long ago.
Standing stones keep a silent secret from man's distant past. Were they sacred temples, sacrificial sites, or the earliest observatories echoing to the footfall of the first astronomers?
Stone circles like this one in the Lake District, Heather, really are amongst the earliest manifestations of an interest in astronomy.
Clive Ruggles has spent many years studying these Stone Age sites to work out how our ancestors viewed the heavens.
For them, the one thing that would be constant, if you like, is the sky. Wherever they went, the sky would be exactly the same. And they'd be looking, they could see the cycles as well, not only the sky, but also the cycles in the sky, the sun and the moon, the phases of the moon especially, would be things that they'd always be able to recognise. If you like, it's something they could always relate to, so that you might orientate your sight on the rising or setting position of the sun or the moon, something like that.
Would they have noticed the planets as well as the sun and the moon?
Surely they'd have been noticing them. I'm sure the earliest people noticed at least the planets, the movements of the naked eye planets, that is Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Mars and Saturn. I'm not sure there'd have been much direct use to them in the sense of like the sun, looking at the rising and setting of the sun is in use in making a calendar, but I'm sure they noticed the movements of the planets, oh yes.
So who were the first people to really get to grips with thinking about the heavens in a kind of abstract way?
Well, I think the first that we know of that is the ancient Greeks. Now, then we come on to people who really were trying to reason about the heavens. The reasoning is, say, we think about the Earth. Now, there isn't a huge wind blowing in from one direction from space all the time, so hence the Earth isn't moving through space. Makes sense, doesn't it? Hence the Earth must be at the centre of the universe, and all the things like the sun and the moon that we see circling round, they must be going round the Earth.
It was 2,000 years from stone circles to the Greeks' vision of the solar system. Earth was an all-important sphere at the centre. The sun circled it once a day. By night, the Greeks observed slow-moving objects in the sky, planets, which they named after the gods. First Mercury, then beautiful Venus. The sun rolled along next, followed by blood-red Mars. Finally, regal Jupiter and slow-moving Saturn brought up the rear. For 15 centuries, this vision of heavenly harmony held sway. 16th century Europe was a jewel in the crown of civilization. Art, architecture, music and literature flourished in a way which had not been seen since the days of the Greeks. Scholars had adopted the Greek view of the universe, which, by fortunate coincidence, echoed the Church's view of the order of things. And order is what the Renaissance Church maintained. It severely punished anyone who stepped out of line. But in this Florentine house, 400 years ago, lived a man who spoke with the courage of his convictions and turned the world on its head. I went there with Carol Stott, curator of astronomy at the Old Royal Observatory at Greenwich. And she told me about the first man to look at the planets in close-up.
The man was Galileo, and what he did was to use the newly invented telescope to look up at the heavens. He'd heard about it from the Low Countries, and he thought, I really rather fancy one of those instruments, so he made himself one. He very, very soon saw some new marvellous things up in the heavens, and he wrote about them.
What kinds of things did he get to see?
The telescope actually brings the heavens a little bit closer to you, and so you can see some of the details. On the moon he could see the mountains, and Venus he could see all the different phases, which was all brand new.
The changing illumination of Venus convinced Galileo that it circled the sun and not the Earth. When he looked at Jupiter, he found 4 moons going round it. Here was proof that by no means everything circled the Earth. The new view that Galileo was seeing through his telescope convinced him that the Greeks and the Church had got it all wrong.
It suggested that, in fact, the planets were moving around the sun and not around the Earth, which other people had thought.
But hang on, wasn't Copernicus saying that about a century before?
Yes, he was. The difference, if you like, was that Copernicus was actually using mathematical proof, whereas Galileo used the telescope, and he could actually see that we did, in fact, move around the sun. He had the courage, if you like, to actually believe what he saw, which changed one's ideas about the universe. And in particular, it changed your ideas, not just astronomical knowledge, but about the whole beliefs of life, which the rest of the people weren't so quick to accept.
How did it affect the very religious people?
It was really the church that weren't very keen on the new ideas, because in fact the sun was at the centre of the universe and not the earth, and so it changed the importance of the earth and consequently of the church as well. And he was instructed really not to teach anybody about his ideas, not to pass his ideas on. But Galileo couldn't be stopped. He was convinced that the sun was at the centre, and so they finally said to him, "Okay, you've got to stay in your house." And so Galileo spent his final years as a prisoner in his own house here in Arcetri.
But in the end, it had to be admitted that Galileo was right and that everyone else had been wrong. And just like Galileo said, the sun is in the centre of the solar system, and we're just one of the planets circling it. And that's pretty much how we see things today, except that astronomers will keep on making discoveries. By the 18th century, telescopes were everywhere. England was buzzing with astronomy. Professionals observed at the newly built Royal Observatory in Greenwich, while amateurs sketched the heavens from their backyards. One man who really caught the bug was William Herschel, a musician by day and at night an avid stargazer. Although an amateur, William was to become famous. His telescopes are still housed at Greenwich, and I asked Carol Stott to tell me about him and his work.
There were other people, many people in fact, like there are today, looking through telescopes and enjoying the heavens. But William was a little bit different. He was out every night. He was a giant amongst astronomers. Quite fantastic.
So, what did William find in his immense survey of the heavens?
He was looking at stars, as I said, and in particular at double stars. But one night he saw something that moved.
When he first saw it, did he think he had in fact discovered a planet?
No, he didn't. The very first thing that he thought was he discovered a comet, because to discover a planet was really quite fantastic. You just couldn't imagine that. Nobody had done it before, and nobody was expecting to discover a planet, and he only accepted it some time later when everybody else said to him, it really is a planet, it's something absolutely new.
At a stroke, Herschel's new planet doubled the size of the solar system. They thought of calling it Planet Herschel, or George's star to keep the king happy. But in the end, they decided it was best to stick with mythology. It was named Uranus, the god who was Saturn's father. The next giant leap came not through the telescope, but through the power of the human brain. The particular brain in question was that of John Couch Adams, a Cambridge maths student in his early 20s, whose forte was in calculating planetary orbits. A century and a half on, I visited Cambridge to talk to one of his modern counterparts.
Conrad, how was the next planet Art discovered?
Well, people looked at Uranus and they found that it wobbled a bit. So a Cambridge maths student like me made some calculations.
Just like you. When was this?
This was about 1846. And he predicted that there had to be another planet, which caused the wobbling in Uranus's orbit.
Was that easy to do?
No, it's really rather tricky.
Didn't have computers in those days.
No, it was all by hand.
His calculations not only predicted the existence of another planet, but they told astronomers where to look. A brief telescope search pinpointed it just where Adams had predicted. It was called Neptune, and it brought the total number of planets to 8. The solar system grew again, but did Neptune mark its outer boundary? When astronomers found that Neptune, in its turn, was being pulled out of position, the search was on once more. Telescopes again scanned the skies for a mystery planet. One big observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, was specially built by a rich American, Percival Lowell, to track it down. Long after Lowell's death, the search bore fruit. And Clyde Tombaugh, now 80 years old, is the only person alive to have discovered a new planet.
I was an amateur astronomer And I had made drawings of Mars and Jupiter with my homemade 9-inch telescope and sent them to the Low Observatory, and they were impressed with their quality and invited me to come out on the staff.
Clyde, then 25, spent every night in the chilled telescope dome photographing the sky. By day, he would work at comparing the positions of stars on huge glass photographic plates. Thousands of plates and millions of star images later, Clyde finally found two which showed a point of light shifting against the background. After years of searching, planet number 9, Pluto, had at last come to light. Clyde, you're the only person alive to have discovered a planet, Pluto. How did you feel when you found it?
Well, it was terrific, because when I turned that one field in, I immediately spied it, and I knew from the amount of shift, knowing the interval of the plates and the scale of the plates, I knew instantly that the object was far beyond the orbit of Neptune. I knew it instantly. And it was a terrific thrill. In fact, so thrill I practically shook with excitement. And I thought, oh, I'd better check this with the third plate. I might be fooled. So I got out the third plate, and the image was in the correct position there, and then I was 100% sure.
Terrific. Clyde Tomball's discovery, made in 1930, completes our picture of our neighborhood in space. The Sun and its planets form a family group. Pluto marks its outer boundary. Then from Neptune we go inwards towards Uranus, Saturn and Jupiter, 4 huge worlds made almost entirely of the gas they snatched around themselves at birth. Then to the small solid worlds, Mars, our own Earth, Venus and, innermost of all, Mercury. At the center of things is the all-powerful Sun, our star. Midnight in a suburban garden. The Cook family are up late, again.
Tony, can you really see much through a cheap pair of binoculars like those?
Yes, you can see star clusters, comets, variable stars.
Wow.
You can also do quite a lot of work using the naked eye. But if you really want to do detailed work, you have to use a telescope, such as my mother has got.
Gosh, that's neat. Is that the kind of thing you can just buy in a local shop down the road?
Oh, yes, indeed. It's a 2-inch refractor. The light collects from the lens, and you can see a lot of detail on the moon, craters and the mountains, and you can see the rings of Saturn and the 4 satellites of Jupiter and the phases of Venus. But if you want to see real detail on the moon, then you need a bigger telescope like the reflecting telescope my husband has.
Oh, look at that. That's fantastic. How big is that one, Jeremy?
It's a 12-inch telescope. It's a Newtonian reflector telescope. It's got a big mirror at the back, and it's got quite a high magnification.
What kind of things can you see through that, then?
Well, you can see the moon, which is what we're particularly interested in, the planets, you can see galaxies, nebulae, double stars, lots of things.
The universe, in short.
Yes, in fact, if you really want to get something better than this, you've got to use the telescopes that the professionals use.
8,000 feet above the dust and heat of Tucson and high above the deserts of Arizona sit the clustered domes of Kitt Peak Observatory, the world's largest collection of astronomical telescopes. Astronomers queue for years to use these instruments. Tonight on the biggest telescope it's the turn of Frank Lowe.
How does this kind of setup differ from what an amateur astronomer would have at his disposal?
Well, in some ways, Heather, it differs very little. The first job of any astronomer is to point his telescope in the right place.
Right.
And here we do that by these electronic controls in the computer. Then, of course, once you've located your object, you've got the telescope pointed, you've got to guide it. And this little box allows the astronomer to do that by just pushing the right button. look through these big telescopes anymore. We always use electronic devices. Once we've located the object of interest, whatever that might be, we then put that light onto an electronic device called a detector, an infrared detector or an optical detector. It measures how much light in the various components of the light exist, puts out lots and lots of numbers all night long. These numbers are gathered in yet another computer, the one right behind you, for future analysis, and from that the scientific conclusions can be drawn.
But optical telescopes are just one way of looking. They can only extend what your eyes already see. With a radio telescope, you get a new picture because you're tuned into another frequency of radiation. With several connected together, you get a very detailed new picture. And here, on the cattle plains of New Mexico, the 27 radio telescopes of the Very Large Array gang up to get a view of the universe unaffected by clouds, rain, and even daylight. Jupiter through radio eyes. The red blobs are part of a magnetic field thousands of times stronger than Earth's. A different frequency reveals Venus's hotspots, which may be active volcanoes. Try as they might, people looking at planets have always been held down by gravity. And yet, here we are, in an observatory, 41,000 feet above sea level. The Kuiper Airborne Observatory carries astronomers up and away so they can observe from anywhere in the world. And it gets above most of the atmosphere, which means they can capture radiation, like infrared, that doesn't penetrate down below. Tonight, we're over the Pacific.
Tower control on. You got it, Alan. How much time on this leg? 15 minutes. Sandy, you might want to note the elevation here and have this air looking good all night.
Why do you fly an observatory like this at 41,000 feet?
Well, from the ground, there are some radiations that you can't see. In the infrared from the ground, it's like it's cloudy all the time, and so we get up to this altitude to get above it. It's nice and clear.
Well, you might say that. We can't see much through the rim of this aircraft, but you have got a telescope on board, haven't you?
That's right. There's a 3-foot telescope that looks out through a hole in the side of the airplane.
What are you looking at the moment?
At the moment, we're looking at Venus. In the atmosphere of Venus, there's a lot of sulfur dioxide, which mixes with water and produces sulfuric acid. We're going to look for the sulfuric acid.
But if you really want a grandstand view, you need one of these things. Since the early 1960s, space probes have flown past all the planets known throughout history. Mighty Jupiter has had 2 visits, and is soon due for a 3rd. Saturn, surely the tourist attraction of the 21st century, has already been photographed thousands of times. And now our probes are going on beyond, to planets we hardly know. This space eye view is a simulation, but the probes have sent back real photographs. Thousands of space probe images were strung together to make this movie of Jupiter rotating. Some of the weirdest places we've seen are Jupiter's moons. Some are cracked balls of dirty ice. One is hot and riddled with active volcanoes. Saturn's rings are like a swarm of millions of moons. Under space probe scrutiny, they're more complex than we could ever dream.
For contact. Come on, let her down. You level off.
But there's no substitute for actually going there.
Let her on down. Okay, 6%, plenty fat. Contact. Stop. Boom. Wow! Oh, man! Oh, run is finally here, Houston. Fantastic. Hey, John, this is perfect with the loom and the rover and you and Stone Mountain and the old flag. Come on out here and give me a salute. Big Navy salute.
Since 1969, 12 men have walked on the desolate plains of our moon. It's been a dress rehearsal for our future trips to the planets. The moon's lack of atmosphere makes it ideal as an observatory site. Through the lens of an ultraviolet camera, Earth's magnetic field shines with the glow of energetic atomic particles. The camera reveals gas clouds in space, poised to form stars. And in the dark lunar skies, it's not just the American flag that's star-spangled. But why look? Why go there? Why spend all this money on something that hardly touches on people's lives? Astrogeologist Hal Mazursky.
We think, in fact, the study of the planet very directly bears on people's lives. We think the planets are ready-made laboratories where we can study things that might happen on the Earth. We've worried about pollution and dust in the atmosphere. We can look at a giant global Mars dust storm and measure exactly what it does to the surface of Mars. People have worried about acid rain. We can study the Venus atmosphere where the clouds are pure sulfuric acid. In this way, we have this laboratory where we can study these effects without undergoing these terrible things that might happen on the Earth. By studying the planets, we might be able to ensure our survival on the Earth.
The Earth is just one of 9 planets around an average star, the Sun, circling it like moths around a candle flame. It isn't even among the biggest or most spectacular of the planets. The planets have no light of their own. From a distance, the Sun would seem to be completely alone. From further away, our Sun merges into the billions of stars making up our Milky Way galaxy. And our galaxy is among billions in the universe as a whole.
And so the Sun is just one of over a million stars in the universe. It's staggeringly insignificant, and our beautiful planet Earth, along with its fellow worlds, the children of the Sun, is just the merest speck. But together we make up a typical corner of the cosmos, and it's a corner we've only just begun to explore.
Next week, Heather Couper visits Mercury, the hottest planet, and Venus, which is bathed in acid rain and shrouded in choking gas. Part 2 of The Planets is next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. To accompany this series, there's a Channel 4 paperback entitled The Planets. It's by Heather Couper with Nigel Henbest and is available from bookshops, priced £6.95.